said from Liverpool, so that was the cheeky link to the Beatles, where they're from. I'm an EM trainee. I've got a specialist interest in paediatric emergency medicine, and I dabble a bit in education as well. Now, if you're sat there wondering, what on earth is an EM trainee from Liverpool doing here speaking to you today? I don't blame you. The thought has occurred to me as well, and I feel really honored to be here among these great speakers. But I'm actually here to tell you about my journey, what brought me here, so that you too can learn from my experience. I'm going to start with something simple. If you had to go out and buy a sunflower, it would be natural, almost instinctive, that when you go home, you're going to take that sunflower, put it in the sun, and water it. So if it's so obvious, so instinctive with sunflowers, that they need to be in the right environment to thrive and flourish, then why is it that we don't apply the same obviousness to humans? And this isn't a novel idea. Companies, the likes of Google and other companies, have really kind of invested in office environments because they find that if you're in the right place and in the right space, then their employees are much more productive. And I had the pleasure, because of this talk, to Google the Google offices. Are you ready for what I found? This is, I kid you not, a Google office. And they have pods so that their employees, who probably don't even work shifts, can take naps during their break. There were some people who even were allowed to take dogs to work. If I could take my dog to work, I would be a happy bunny. So the take-home message from this talk is when we all get back to work, we're going to apply for an office upgrade, and we can apply to take our dogs to work. I think if I get that sorted, my job here is done. But all joking aside, this is my favorite place to work. It was one of my favorite hospitals. This is the Royal Liverpool Hospital. You can tell it's England just by the sunny sky. And as you can see, it's no Google office, is it? But I really enjoyed working there. And when I worked there, I had to reflect on why. Why would I want to work in this place? It's awful. I can tell you that because they're building a new one out the back, so we're still good. And the reason is, just like sunflowers need the sun, humans need humans. And I could go into a talk about why the humans there were amazing, but that would be a talk in itself. It included things like human factors, hierarchy gradients. It was all about everyone from the consultants, the nurses, the healthcare assistants. They all had that shared mental model that everyone wanted to be excellent and do the best. It was a very busy department, and it was a very challenging place to work, but I loved it. But then, I only worked there for 3 or 4 months. So what have I been doing the rest of my career? And I'm not going to say that the other hospitals I worked in weren't excellent as well. They were excellent hospitals. But sometimes as trainees, we may be put in a place where people don't really subscribe to our learning needs. And we may be working shifts where we spend 50% of our time where we are the people look to kind of give the departmental model of learning. So we really have to find another way as adult learners to make the most of our experience. And this is where these guys came in. This is a very flattering photo of us. It was taken in July 2014 when we created RCEM Learning. That was, at the time, it was called RCEM FOMED. Now, RCEM stands for the Royal College of Emergency Medicine in the UK. And the college at the time wanted to buy in to FOMED as a result of some very clever people, including Chris Walsh and Simon Lang, who are the guys kneeling down at the peripheries of this photo. Because they realized FOMED was a movement that its members could benefit from. And I've been asked to describe to you what FOMED is. Now, I'm aware if you're at a Don't Forget the Bubbles conference, that you probably know what FOMED is. So in a nutshell, it's free, it's online, and it's education. And the way it works is it tends to be a bit different in the way that people tend to interact with what they know. There's a lot of open dialogue, and it tends to be a bit more it has a bit more of an entertainment value to it. And people interact with that, and then they go online through social media, so mainly the likes of Twitter, and they tend to have discussions around it. So this is our website. You can find us at rcemlearning.co.uk. We've changed over the last few months, and we've morphed from the more classic site to combine the two kind of classic models of learning and the FOMED model. So you can still find the reference sections, exams, and CPD, but then there's the FOMED section, and I'm there as the blog editor. And we release blogs about twice a month. Because I have a specialist interest in paediatrics, you'll find a lot of paediatric blogs there, so I encourage you to go and have a look. And then we release a podcast of the month. And in that podcast, we have papers of the month and a lot of kind of discussions about topics as well. If ever you want to contribute, please come and find us after the session and drop me a line on Twitter if you don't find me. But moving on to where I was before, this is the editorial board. And these people, to me, have been like my family of friends. We have a lot of discussions around education and around things that are important to us. So we talk about what we're going to produce, we peer review each other's stuff, but more than that, we've created a friendship where everyone kind of has the same thinking. And because of them, I feel like I've become a better person. Now, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of stuff which goes on in our Slack feed, which is WhatsApp for people who don't use it, which has a lot to do with dogs and babies. This, for example, is one of our latest conversations, one of us, and we all have access to the RCEM Learning Twitter feed. One of us, and we can't figure out who, has been retweeting the sex bots from the Royal College of Emergency Medicine's Twitter handle, nonetheless. And there's a lot of that, and that's really important because that is what makes friendship. There has to be banter for you to be able to constructively criticize each other and learn from each other. And for example, on Twitter, so moving away from my family sphere, when I put on a blog about learning needs according to Maslow, so Maslow was a philosopher who basically believed that in order to reach higher levels of motivation, including learning and education, you had to satisfy the most basic of needs. And my theory was that if Maslow was right, how on earth was emergency medicine going to have a chance in the education world? Because there are shifts where I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, and I'm lacking sleep. So how can I ever move on to higher levels of self-actualization and transcendence? There was no way we were going to do that. And what I got back was this, which is fair enough. Wi-Fi and battery is really important. But I have another theory as well, and I think Maslow is probably wrong, and that is the theory of Alfred Adler. Now, Alfred Adler was another philosopher, and he believed that humans have one motivation, and that is to belong and feel significant. And that is where medicine really plays a part, because when we work in a team, you feel like you belong. And especially in emergency medicine, you tend to do things, and the result is almost instantaneous, isn't it? So realistically, medicine has this really good place to educate and nurture learners. But moving on from that, the FOMED world is also a great place to learn. Because if I had to say write a blog off the back of a lecture which I've given to 10 or 15 people, and that blog is read by 3,000 people, then I can immediately feel the impact of it. And even the FOMED community, my immediate circle of friends, and then on Twitter, I can feel like I almost belong there. So this has created a little community for us where we feel like we can all thrive off each other. And although I live in Liverpool at the moment, I'm originally from a place called Malta. It's a little island in the Mediterranean. And there's a saying where I'm from, "Aidlima min tamila unaidlek minint." Tell me who your friends are, and I will tell you who you are. And if you had to take that idea, that if you surround yourself with the right people, then their actions become infectious and their way of thinking becomes infectious, then you tend to mirror what they do. And if you had to imagine that you could surround yourself with anyone you wanted, irrespective of time or geography, that is where FOMED has taken us today. And I know I'm sounding a bit like a prophet here, and I'm not saying that everything on FOMED is great and you should follow everyone there because everyone's amazing. It's up to you who you choose to follow. But it's actually the first step that's the hardest. And what you put in is very much what you take out. So if you want to write a couple of blogs, that is great. But if you want to get more involved, that's even better. And that is the most important thing about adult education, that you can be taught, but you're never going to remember. You involve yourself in your own learning, and that's when you kind of take home all the messages. And that has been the beauty of social media for me, because not only have we been able through FOMED to socialize with what we know, and to learn from socializing, but we've also created a community where everyone has a shared mental model of wanting to be a better clinician. So if you're still sat there wondering how on earth an emergency medicine trainee like me has come to stand before you today and talk, then I urge you to flip the paradigm depicted on this slide and reach out to those online to see where your journey will take you. And as I'm here making the most out of my journey, I'm going to ask you, what would you think if I sang out of tune? Would you stand up and walk out on me? Lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song. And I'll try, I really will try not to sing out of key. But
I get high with a little help from my friends. I'm gonna try a little help from my friends.
I get high with a little help from my friends. I get high with a little help from my friends. I'm gonna try a little help from my friends. I get high with a little help from my friends. I get high with a little help from my friends. I'm gonna try a little help from my friends.
thank you.
Thanks heaps, Nikki, and that's really awesome to hear such a strong focus on friendship, because that's something that we talk about after SMAC conferences and I'm sure it'll be a feature after Don't Forget the Bubbles, is the concrete knowledge that we take away is one thing, but the actual connections and friendships that carry on and are very enduring because they're built around that common space is another. So Casey, anything from Twitter on that?
I guess one thing that sort of comes up, and Nikki, maybe you can tell us about your experience, is that people sometimes have that fear of entering that online space because, as you saw, there's sex bots and trolls and all sorts of people out there. The FOMED community is pretty good, but can you just tell us what your experience of being involved in all that is? Anything negative or positive?
So I'm going to be honest, a lot of criticism is that it can sometimes be a bit cliquey, but I've actually found that the community is very inclusive as a community, and kind of putting yourself out there and getting ready to make mistakes and learn has really become a way where I've kind of been able to learn how to be a better person and change my model of thinking, to be open to criticism, be open to making mistakes and then learning from them. And I found that the whole experience was a really good one.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess one, and it's more of a question that gets thrown at me every time I talk about the positivity of these sorts of things, is what are you not doing because you're spending time dedicated to these things? And as a trainee, but then as a parent, as a different roles. So what are we missing out on?
So
and what are you not doing?
I do work a lot in my free time. It's almost a bit sad, but there was a blog by Andy Tagg who sat on the second row. about how you learn to work smarter as well. So instead of trolling online on Facebook, reading some really stupid photos of people's dogs and babies, then actually, if you're trolling on Twitter, it's a bit better because you're probably reading a blog that's got more significance to what you do. And I think that has changed the way I work. That doesn't go to say that I don't miss out on some things, but I learn to choose what's important as well.
Yep. So on that, because I know that the other two of you guys have a lot of professional hobbies, and that's certainly helped me understanding that that's what this is. A lot of the blog and podcasting and stuff is a professional hobby. Have you got any tips about how you maximise your time spent on these, Celine?
Yeah. For me, what I've started doing when I first started, my focus was everywhere. I mean, just everywhere, and there was no, I guess, unity or synchrony in all the things that I was doing. And so you're working harder, but you're not working smarter. And slowly you start figuring out that you create a little niche for yourself. And that niche not only turns into a blog post or a podcast, you also work on getting a publication out of it. You work on giving it as a lecture. And so it actually gets used in multiple formats. Yeah. And so I find that that's a real efficient way of the time invested in preparing that information also goes into these other things.
Yeah. And Grace, you got any experiences? I guess you've got a unique experience because you've kind of grown up in foam to a degree, from med student to intern to now entering your trainee, specialty training.
I think so. It's important to find a balance and to never negate the foundational knowledge that we get in med school through textbooks, through journals and things like that. But I think that foam has a really important role in engaging learners like me, junior doctors, but also with the knowledge translation gap that Salim was talking about, engaging maybe people who are out of training, who have completed their training and want to stay up to date in a way that is meaningful and that they can directly apply to their own patients. I think what I do is that there's a lot of foam resources and it can get very overwhelming, but honing in and focusing and sort of think of it like, I like to think of it a bit like shopping. Some people enjoy going to the shopping mall and walking around for 5 hours, and but other people have an intent and purpose. If you've got 1 hour of time and you need to get a certain outfit, you need to learn a specific procedure, or you're preparing to give a talk to med students about gastrointestinal complications, then you can direct that learning there. Have a few key websites that you like using, like Don't Forget the Bubbles or Life in the Fast Lane, and also ask around, like Nikki was talking about in the community. There are lots of people who are willing to help and to give advice. I've seen people on Twitter just be like, I need to learn more about this, what would you recommend? And people will tweet back blog posts, but they will also tweet back journal articles they read, or doing things like the Bubble Wrap, which is our online journal club. All those things I find help me direct my knowledge and direct the time that I spend in foam.
If I could say one more thing. So I think there's really two camps here that you need to answer the question for. So there's producers and there's consumers, yep. Right? And so I think for producers, probably the most efficient way to do things is formulate a team. The more people you have on your team that help you, the less actual work that you're doing by yourself, because there's other people that are picking up the moving pieces. And I think we're starting to see a lot of that in blogging now, is that it's not just one person. Even Scott Weingart, who was kind of the last holdout that was working by himself, he's even now brought on several people to help him out in his blog. Yeah. So I think as a producer, having a team that you can bounce ideas off of, get peer review, just these nice friendships is a real efficient way to do it. As a consumer, there is a lot out there, and everyone has to answer the question for themselves, what topics are the most important. But the one thing I would say is you shouldn't have to go out and find the information, maybe initially, but once you've found it, you should always have it pushed to you. So there are things like Feedly, where you can register for the blog, and every time there's a new publication, your Feedly app tells you, or PubMed alerts if there's a particular journal you like to follow that sends you that information.
Excellent. Everyone go up and swamp Sal. He's here for today only, one day only. Go and swamp him at lunchtime and afternoon tea to talk more about that. Andy knows his way around a bit of that stuff as well. Finally, before we move on, Grace, to the last talk, I'll just hit back to you, Casey, because you're in a different context again in that you're relatively isolated in your area of practice. So what are your tips for actually managing your time and integrating that with family, with work, and why is it important to you?
Well, I was very lucky in that I had a paid day a week to teach, which is very rare in the first world, and so I really ran with that. And I could have just sat around developing lectures that never went anywhere, but I decided to get involved in this instead. So I think I was lucky, but I think you should ask my wife that question. I'm not the person to answer that.
Okay.
Yep.
And my hot tip is do a project working with Victoria Brazel, because she is phenomenal, and you go along for the ride then.